Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dean and welcome to my very first devlog. Today I'm going to be talking about my game idea that I have planned and have begun working on. I want to go through the concept that I've come up with, break it down into features and kind of talk over the general design that I've got going so far, and then kind of talk about what I've implemented so far and where I plan to take it from here. So first off, we'll jump straight into Milanote. I'm using Milanote here just to kind of show off how my game design document is kind of laid out. I wanted to be able to lay it out in a nice, easy way, and I found that Milanote is pretty good for this. Not a sponsored video, by the way, just using it. So let's go over the game idea. The idea for this game that I had here was to try and come up with something that I could make in like 2 weeks and then watch it just kind of blow out of scope and watch it take 2 months. It's going pretty well on that track, but the idea itself is quite simple, and I'm hoping to try and keep it that way for as long as possible. So the idea itself is I'm trying to make just an iOS mobile game, just in Unity. It's kind of like a 2.5D game where we look here at this little cube I've got here. Essentially, the cube kind of drops down from the top, and then there's these little kind of like drops in between the platforms that spawn. And the idea is it's just kind of like drop in between each platform. And then the camera is slowly going to scroll upwards. So if the cube ends up off screen because the camera's scrolled too far upwards, you lose. And you have to start again. So it's almost like an endless runner where the cube just kind of drops down all these different levels. And it's going to get quicker, and I'm going to add obstacles and stuff like that. So very simple game idea. Fairly straightforward, but as game design goes, things get complicated. So for features, what I've got room spawning. I wanted to try and make it so that each room, let me explain this as well. Each one of these is going to be a room, a bit like this. A bit like this. So the cube is just going to drop into a room. I should be using my mouse. The little kind of floor is going to have a kind of like a breakout in it, or like a door. And then the position of this in each room is going to be randomized. So I need to calculate how big each panel is going to be, and then randomly place this kind of gap in between each room. I also have the idea of adding like a button or a switch or something that I can use to kind of force the player to go a little bit further than they may have to, or like change the direction so they're not always just gunning straight for the doors, the gaps in each room. Maybe there's like something that will make they need to go to this first before they can go through the gap, and that should just add like a little bit of difficulty to the game as it progresses through. Because I don't want people getting into the pattern of just being able to go just straight through the gaps, because once you get the hang of it, you've got it, right? So I want to kind of throw in these little curveballs that kind of make the game a little bit more difficult, a little bit more interesting, and that's my idea for that. So I want to be able to spawn these rooms randomly. I want to like all throughout code. So the idea isn't to have like a prefab of a room and then like move the floor and then make another room and then change the floor again and then just spawn them randomly. I'm actually going to completely build each room randomly. So what I've kind of decided to do is, on this one here, this is kind of like a side-on view of what we're looking at. Now, there's a little bit of like kind of calculation happening here. Just kind of like wrapping my head around how I wanted to approach this. So if I scroll in a little bit, imagine this is the room here. And there's your door, the left side and the right side. Basically, I've got this kind of origin point here, and I want to be able to spawn this kind of, it's going to be a cube that's going to get stretched out. So a cube here, and then I want to calculate a gap, and that's going to move. And then I want to spawn in another cube, and then there's going to be a cube on the left here that's going to act as a wall, and a cube on the right that's also going to act as a wall. And everything's basically going to come from this little origin point here. And then that's going to shift downwards the length of the height of the room. So each room is going to have like a set height. Maybe that changes as the game progresses. We'll see. But for now, that's just going to be like a set height. And then everything's going to be calculated based off this little origin point. So from there, what I need to do is create game objects for each one of these cubes that are then going to get stretched out. I need to calculate how big they're going to be. I need to calculate their position based on the origin and the previous objects. So from here, I've got like the available space of the room. There's a left side, a right side, a door, and then I've got this little offset here to kind of like help with the randomization of the placement of the room. So maybe the left side will be more dominant one time, and then there'll be an offset to say that it's not necessarily going to be in the center of the left side. Maybe it'll be like slightly to the left of that. Maybe it'll be slightly to the right, just so that it's not like always on the left, on the right in the same spots. Like I want to be able to kind of shift them around and make it a little bit more, it needs to be like very random. So yeah, I'm just trying to up the randomization as much as possible, and that's how I'm going to go about doing that. So once again, very, very simple idea. There's not much to it. That was the idea of this, was to make something as simple as possible, and that already right there is being quite complicated, and I'll show you where my progress is on that in a minute. Moving on though, so I need to randomize the door position, as I've mentioned, just so that that doesn't always end up in the same spot. I need to create movement. The idea of this is that the cube is going to be one-to-one with your finger. So if I had my finger on my phone, for example, I'll just pause that, there we go. If I have my finger on my phone, I basically want the cube kind of dropping from the top. It's going to be vertical like this. And then I want to be able to drag my finger left and right, and then the cube at the top is going to move exactly where my finger is horizontally. Vertically, there's not going to be any movement at all, but horizontally, it's going to be exactly one-to-one with my finger, which means you can move very quickly across the room, and the level is going to move everything. So vertically, the cube doesn't really move. There's no gravity. Basically, the level is kind of going to scroll up. Essentially, it's kind of a bit like, I think, Pokemon's made like that. The old school Pokemon games were like would move the level instead of the character. The character would always stay at the same spot, I believe. That kind of movement. That's what we're going for. And then next up after that is the camera scrolling, which is, as I said, kind of the whole level basically is going to move up. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to move the whole level up or if I'm just going to kind of have that sort of feeling. We'll see when I get there. Next, death, as I explained earlier, is basically whenever the cube ends up off screen because it's scrolled too far up. That's game over. You weren't getting through the holes quick enough. And then it was just going to reset. Maybe I'll have like a score as well. Stretch goals. We'll see what happens. And then I also want a main menu because I want it to be kind of pretty and polished. And the idea is to be able to just kind of release this at some point just on the iOS marketplace. Yeah, that is so far the idea for the game. So where are we up to? This is what it looks like. As you can see, it's going swimmingly. I'd just done a bit of a refactor on how I was going about doing my rooms, and it's kind of thrown off a little bit of my calculations, but that's okay. I'll come back and I'll clean this up. Let's quickly go over what I've got so far. This is a little bit wrong. As you can see, the walls are out here when they should be inside this game object here. So basically, how I've gone about this is I have a room manager, which is kind of like the parent object, and that is going to be responsible for spawning rooms, each one of these rooms here. And then from there, the room is going to have a walls object and a floor object, and the walls are the left and right walls, and then the floor is going to make up the left side of the floor, the gap, which would then have a door eventually, and then there's going to be the right side of the floor. And those objects can be referenceable, and later on, if I want to be able to swap those out from cubes to like a prefab that has a texture on it or a material or something, it should be easily swappable because I have access to those game objects that I've spawned. as you can see here. So yeah, that is my progress so far on my game, Dropcube. It's got a very cool name. Yeah, stay tuned. I plan to kind of follow this up a little bit more. Yeah, I haven't really decided where I'm going with this. It's just kind of like off the cuff, just jumping in. Thought I would throw it where I'm up to, what my plans are, and I might touch base again in a couple days, and we'll see how we're at. Yeah.